Hi folks, before I post any videos on the Pisces transits that I had referred to in my last video, I wanted to put this particular video out. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you know what I just said about the Pisces video, that's fine. Whatever the video is that's supposed to come out next will come out. As you know, Mercury goes retrograde on April the 1st, at least I am assuming you know this, and if you don't know this, that's fine too. So Mercury goes retrograde in the sign of Aries on April the 1st, and I have already done a video on Mercury going retrograde about 2 or 3 videos ago, so you can always refer to that for a fuller interpretation of the transit on various levels, the mundane levels and the more sort of what I find a more sort of philosophical reason for Mercury to go retrograde and how it actually is helpful to us, and the fact that it's conjuncting Chiron 3 times and what it means this time around, and where it fits into the bigger picture, and so on and so forth. It's this bigger picture that is a little bit more interesting. There were a few thoughts that I had as Mercury was getting ready to go retrograde, and I wanted to share them with you. And I wonder if this will resonate for you, or you find it useful or helpful. And if you do, great. If you don't, you can let it go. As you know, at least in terms of videos and the bigger picture that I've been talking about, we have had since the middle of February the ability to move forward, likely in a direction that we may have wanted to move in the second half of 2023, particularly as we headed towards July, August of 2023, and have felt thwarted from doing so since September. Middle of February, somehow it felt like the gates opened, and now, of course, there's a sense of forward movement, but the forward movement is it's one of those things that when the gates are not necessarily all that open, the urge to move and the urge to jump and do something rebellious and impulsive is there. And once the gates are open, it's just like, shall I take the step? And shall I take the step? And shall I take the step? And do I still want to go there or not? And these are questions. And the second thing, of course, is that when Mercury is direct and moving forward, then there's an all systems go energy that we tend to have. And as Mercury slows down, and Mercury's slowing down now, and this is about the time when I would say we start to feel the slowdown, and it's going to appear stationary to us on April the 1st when it starts to go retrograde, and will take a few days before it really starts to look like it's moving backwards. We also experience, when something like this happens, a kind of a strange pause or a halt, and things that have been galloping forward don't feel like they're galloping forward quite as much. And mentally, we're not quite so ready to jump and move forward as well. So even if 2 weeks ago we were in a place of greater impulsiveness and greater velocity, we might be finding right now that we're kind of, it's a little bit like skidding to a halt a little bit energetically. And especially with this particular Mercury retrograde, there's an element of choice and choosing, and which way are we going, or are we staying, or what is the outcome going to look like, and do I still want to go in that direction that I wanted to? And even if broadly or philosophically I do the specifics still seem the same? And that's an important distinction. If since the second half of 2023, we've been trying to move forward or wanting to move forward in a certain direction, there's both the strategic and philosophical underpinning of what it is that we're trying to do and achieve when it comes to moving in a certain direction. And then there is the specifics of it. So if we have been working in a certain field or at a certain level or at a certain capacity, the philosophical and strategic underpinning may be that we're ready for that, whatever that next step is. And in the second half of 2023, it may have seemed that working in this kind of position, in this kind of company, in this kind of city was what we were aiming to do. And now those specifics we may even be looking at the specifics going, is that what I want to invest in or not? I would hazard to say that based on everything that I am being able to make sense of, the strategic and philosophical underpinning broadly has not really changed, but the specifics are worth, are perhaps being questioned and are perhaps worth questioning. I would say, let the compass spin for a few days. Let the Mercury retrograde. It's one of those things that when the compass spins, and sometimes when we don't quite know which direction, we feel really, we put pressure on ourselves to feel like, I've got to know which way I'm going. I've got to know what the direction. I've got to, and if you don't, and if you can hang on till the end of April, what's the harm? If you can't, then that's a different issue. Now, some of what I'm saying may not apply quite as strongly or powerfully if you've got Mercury retrograde in your birth chart. As I've said to those folks on this channel numerous times before, if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, it's when Mercury is retrograde in the skies that you might feel more decisive and in sync and less needing to deliberate. Also underpinning everything with this Mercury retrograde, with any Mercury retrograde, is we're waiting to see what comes up and what is brought to our attention that has been in our blind spot. Is there something that emerges that we go, oh, I'm so glad I know this, or I'm actually not glad I know this, but I need to know this, or because it is normal and human to move forward based on what we know, and then to project and to fantasize and to assume. That's just part of, and why would Mercury, philosophically, the planet of communication and our mental facts and knowing things and being able to process things mentally and communicate things mentally and transact and, the use of technology, communication, transactions, cognition. When this planet goes, hold on a second, we need to reverse over these degrees. We need to go back to about 15 or 16 degrees of Aries one more time. There might be something that Mercury is basically trying to say where it's not quite ready to make that decision, or not quite ready to jump yet. And some things need to be sorted out or looked at again, or some facts need to emerge, or something needs to be made clear, or through a conversation or an email or something communicative, typically something emerges that you go, oh, this is what is really going on. I did not know this. Or something along those lines. Now, you can always pay attention to, if you want, Mercury entered its shadow period on March the 18th at about 16 degrees of Aries. So you can go back to March the 18th to some extent and think about the things that have occurred and the things that have been brewing. And, since March the 18th, as we headed to about the 24th, 25th, we certainly had that eclipse in Libra, and you can always look at that, so it's not as if Mercury entering its shadow period, the first week of that was, hurtling towards an escalating emotional intensity related to the eclipse. But you can look back to what has been emerging since March the 18th, and especially we've just come off the eclipse, and some of the immediate edge might be off, but eclipses are not full moons. There's enough going on, and we are in this kind of vortex that the edge might not be completely off. The intensity the pace might be a little bit gentler on March the 28th, but I don't know that the intensity is off. Remember, with eclipses, when I like to say God takes the wheel, it kind of means that we are being pushed through this portal. And you might think, well, I'd love to be moved through a portal. I don't have to be pushed through it. But we kind of have to, because you can have different options. And sometimes having choices and having resources can actually be limiting, whereas knowing what is ending and knowing what is not available to us, or knowing what is closing, can spring us into action. So knowing, for example, that those severance payments are going to end, or the unemployment payments are going to end, or something you've been leaning on is going to end, or a job is going to end, or, that kind of constriction can actually, we can look back and realize that it's actually accelerating and pushing us to move in a certain direction. Certain jobs working out and certain jobs not working out, certain offers working out and certain offers not working out, and certain things feeling good and certain things you wanted or expected to feel good that don't feel, all that is kind of Spirit of the Universe's way of saying, all these doors in front of you, I'm trying to get you in front of the one that's meant for you. And we very likely at this point in time, given the astrology of the time, are going, I am ready and clarity would be helpful. And the universe is like, this is going to take a few weeks, likely the month of April. The new moon in Taurus, as I've been saying to you, for those of us especially who have Mercury direct in our birth charts, and this does impact everyone, including those who have Mercury retrograde in their birth charts, because the unfortunate thing for the people who have Mercury retrograde in their birth charts is they have to deal, for the most part, with people who have Mercury direct in their birth charts. So even if you end up feeling decisive during the month of April and very clear and ready to go, you're likely going to be dealing with people who are a little bit out of sorts around you. And it may be that you yourselves have to end up waiting till the last week of April or the beginning of May, or until right after the new moon in May on May the 8th. Now, after the eclipse on the 8th of April, which is conjunct Chiron to the minute, not just the degree, the new moon in May in Taurus is conjunct Uranus. And the new moon in Gemini in June is conjunct Venus, to the degree, not quite to the minute. Now, the conjunction with Uranus is a little bit looser, but it's still conjunct Uranus. I am draconian about wanting a tight orb for aspects, particularly conjunctions and oppositions. It's a little silly of me, but so if I'm saying it's conjunct Uranus, you can rely that it's within 5 degrees. So it's a tight enough conjunction that we can't ignore it. Heading through the eclipses, through this Mercury retrograde, to be spat out at the end of it, heading into a new moon in Taurus that's going to be conjunct Uranus. For a lot of us, we need to go through this next month or so to whatever, we just need to. As I've said to you, for people who have Mercury retrograde in their birth chart, whatever it is that emerges or you think you know or you realize has been in blind spot that becomes visible to you while Mercury is retrograde might make you more decisive and clear while Mercury is retrograde till April the 25th. For the rest of us, we may go through a process till April 27th, 28th, where we are looking at stuff, processing stuff, dealing with stuff that is coming up that we did not know of or aware of, trying to understand how that changes our trajectory. And as I've said to you before, it's going to be early May, and maybe even after that. When you have a new moon conjunct Uranus, you're being set forth on a path. And this is not a new moon in Taurus video. I really need to look at that chart in greater detail to see what else is going on with it. And what are the other aspects that are going on around it. But when you have a new moon conjunct Uranus, you have to believe that after May the 8th, you're going to be in the Taurus part of the chart, be propelled or moved forward onto a path that is more authentic for you. And when you have a new moon conjunct Venus following that in Gemini, and as I said, that new moon in Gemini is when some of us who have Mercury direct in our birth charts is when we might actually feel the impact of the April 8th eclipse. Because when the April 8th eclipse happens, Mercury is retrograde. And so we want Mercury to be direct. We want it to gather some momentum. We want it to be moving. And it may take a second. It may take the Taurus lunar cycle to get things moving. So that by the time we get to the new moon in Gemini in June, we're like, oh, okay. So we've, the ray of sunlight, sunshine, I should say, not just light, not just ray, is there by the end of April into May. And remember that the May new moon is in Taurus, and the prevailing aspect that this Mercury retrograde and the two eclipses are under or conjoined with is Jupiter conjuncting Uranus in Taurus. So the planet that is trying to end a 12-13-year cycle, create a 12-13-year cycle, a new 12-13-year cycle, inaugurate, create an auspicious new beginning, as an astrologer once said to me when he was referring to a Jupiter transit, and I found that to be strangely true. Even sometimes though we're dealing with the ending of a 12-13-year cycle, or the ending part first, but an ending is creating that new beginning. So with Jupiter ending a 12-13-year cycle, creating an auspicious new beginning in the Taurus part of our chart, conjuncting Uranus, and then the May new moon conjuncting Uranus. You've got to believe that this Mercury retrograde and happening, conjuncting Chiron 3 times, with a new moon solar eclipse in Aries conjuncting Chiron to the minute occurring, healing taking place, we've got to understand that it is important to lean into the process. And we've got to, you can, if you're feeling like, you know what, I think I know what the end result of this is. I think I know what the decision, I think I know what is in my heart. I think I know what is going to make me happy. I think I know the direction I want to move in. I think I know. Great. Great. Are you, right now, are you having to sign off on something? Or if not, just put a pin on it. Put a pin in it. And see how you feel about it by April the 28th. As I've said to you, if you commit to things now, between now and April the 28th, and if you have Mercury direct in your birth chart, they may be shorter lived and they may not look exactly the way that you think they're going to look until once Mercury goes direct. Other projects that began or had a life during Mercury retrograde may come up again. You know, this is starting to sound a little bit like my last Mercury, but the 3 points that I wanted to convey, first and foremost, was if you're feeling like, I don't know which way to go, I don't know what to do, this is not clear, that's not clear, but part of the reason that becomes even is when we're dealing with eclipse, if you're having a sense of things ending, things coming to a close, action needing to be taken, change in the air, endings in the air, things, the universe starting to step in and say, I'm taking this away from you, and I'm taking this away from you, and opening this up for you, and I've opened this up for you. And you can even go back to March the 18th, as I said. You know, as you can even look back at all the eclipses and the Mercury shadow period all working together during this period. Very powerful time. And as I said, once the gates are open and we can move forward, I don't think there's anything wrong in going, but wait a second, is that really where I want to go? I've been saying that's what I want for like the second half of 2023. But really, am I sure? And as I said, it wouldn't surprise me if the sort of philosophical underpinning and the goal remains the same. The specifics may need thinking. And as I said in my Mercury retrograde video, sometimes a choice may feel like an either or choice, and it may remain one. But by the end of this period, if you feel like, you know what, I thought I was going to move forward and wanted this, but I think I'm going to stay, I'm still going to move, it will really shock me if you don't commit to moving forward in the strategic direction that you've been dying to move forward in the second half of 2023. I think that that's what this is preparing us to do. I think that is what the eclipse, but especially building on the eclipse, the Taurus and the Gemini new moons are going to propel us to do. It's forward movement time once this Mercury retrograde is over. And if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, it's going to be forward movement time for you very soon. The question is, Do the details of where you're going still look the same? Can you move forward in that direction strategically, but do you feel more comfortable staying where you are? Is it really an either or decision, or can it be a both and decision? Sometimes a decision feels like, oh, it's got to be this and that, but you're like, no, it doesn't have to be at all. I can figure out a way to take advantage of this and that somehow. I can design things with a certain amount of flexibility, so I can avail of both those things somehow. As I said, as we've been looking at the astrology for the remainder of the year, we still have another eclipse of release, a solar eclipse of release on October the 2nd of this year. It could be that what we're releasing has a time release on it. We do a certain amount of release now, a certain amount of release in the second half of this year. The Aries eclipses that are pulling us through, we have another one of those in the first quarter of next year. So it could very well be that we are indeed now moving forward, but that the process could take a certain amount of time, depending on, this is going to depend on each individual. For some of us, with some of these things coming up, it may feel a lot more decisive and a lot more sudden and a lot more jarring. That's just, you don't feel every eclipse with the same intensity. You don't feel every eclipse in the same cycle over the course of a year and a half in the same way. There's typically one eclipse where you really feel the eclipsiness of it. For some people, it's going to be this particular time. For some people, it may have been last year. For some people, it's going to be later on this year. For some people, it's going to be early next year. Whenever it's going to be at that particular point in time. But this particular time with Mercury retrograde eclipses is really potent. And what it is doing, I don't really know necessarily that it's the universe that's going to make... I was going to say, ultimately, I do believe that we have a say in things. I do believe we have a free will, or an element of free will, or even a strong element of free will. So whatever options are presented to us as a result of this next month, or wherever it is that we end up being, it may be. You, dear viewer, what is it that you want? Really? What is going to create and honor that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus for you, in the Taurus part of a chart? What is going to honor the North Node eclipses and the North Node transiting and Chiron transiting Aries, where the Sun is and where Venus is going to enter next week, and where Chiron is, and where we're going to have the new moon, and where Mercury is. And by the time we get to that Taurus new moon, where Mars is going to be. And by that time, I think by the time we deal with the Taurus new moon, I'm just thinking this through. Give me 1 second. Yeah, by the time we're dealing with the Taurus new moon, I think Venus is going to be in Taurus by that point in time, which will be lovely. Sorry. If you're feeling the pressure to commit to something right now, let the compass spin. But this is the second thing I wanted to convey. So the first thing I want to say is, let the compass spin. If you have a sense or feeling about where things are going and where it is that you want to go and what this means, great. Put a pin on it. If you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart and you feel the same way over the next 25, 28 days, 30 days, great. While Mercury is retrograde and you feel in sync and you feel like it's the right decision and you're good with it, okay. You've been decisive then. It's clear for you. For those of us who have Mercury direct in our birth charts, put a pin on it, in it, look at it. If you're not, no one is forcing you to make a commitment at this point in time other than you. And sometimes when there's confusion in the air, and sometimes when we're dealing with eclipsy changes, and sometimes when we're a little scared. And eclipses can scare us because as things and people and situations that eclipsed into our lives and potentially out of our lives, I should say, sorry, and into our lives. It's the out of our lives part especially that is a removal. And that removal means that we're going to have to go without something that was there or someone that was there. And while that propels us towards this portal that we're going through, it propels us into action, which is wonderful. But it can take a second as a result of the eclipses to really experience a certain kind of stability again, depending on how hard the eclipses are hitting you and on what level, emotionally, financially. And the opportunities that eclipses can present can also be exciting. Sometimes eclipses aren't always negative. Sometimes offers come through or that really feel like they're somehow stepping you up a notch or two or a level up, or it feels like, wow, this is not just an ordinary offer that comes with a new moon. This is the end of something and the start of something. But again, then that propels and means change. What am I going to do with this? And what am I going to do with that? And oh my God, and oh my God, and oh my God. So if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, great. It may be that you feel really decisive about certain things and clear. If you have Mercury direct and you have a sense of where you want to go and where the decision making is taking you, great. See how you feel about it a month from now too, unless you're really compelled. Now, here's the second thing I wanted to say. Mercury retrogrades, and this is going to feel counterintuitive, but I feel this strongly. It is a time to get real. Mercury is about facts. In certain traditions, when a planet is retrograde, it is considered more powerful. Sometimes people say it's closer to the Earth. Now, I have not verified this. It could be that when a planet is going retrograde and looks to us like it's moving backwards, but it's really not, it's moving forwards. But it may be that it is physically closer to us as we're going around the sun, and a planet looks to us like it's starting to move backwards. It's really moving forwards, but it could be that it's closer to us. But Mercury is about, with Mercury retrograde, what do we say? We say, hey, it's not, on the surface, it looks like we're going to be confused. On the surface, it looks like facts are not going to be there. On the surface, it looks like things are going to shift around and change. On the surface, the feeling is thinking is not clear. All of that is, I think, fair. But the solution to that for us is to get real and stay real. Rather than getting wrapped up in the fantasy element of and the desire of where am I headed and what is it going to look like, let the where am I headed and the overall goal propel you. You don't have to disown it. But let what guides you over the next month be tactical. Especially if you're dealing with things getting eclipsed out, potentially getting eclipsed in, and especially the eclipsed out is creating momentum. And if you are concerned, or if you are frightened, or if you are anxious because things are shifting and the rug feels like it's being, so, and choices have to be made and you don't quite know how things are going to happen, get totally real. What do I know? What is true? What are my priorities? So an example could be if something financial is being closed out. How much is in the bank? How much do I need next month? What do I need to do? Do I need to hustle? Do I need to do something to generate something? Do I need to, and is there a larger, it's not like I would be surprised if opportunities aren't there also, hopefully, for if someone is dealing with something like that. But keep the focus grounded and operational. If someone puts a contract in front of you, is everything in there? Have I looked at it? Everything that we talked about? Am I missing anything? Grounded and real. If you want another job, or you're looking for another job, or you know that the general direction is, and if something is coming up in your current environment, what is the most grounded timeline? What makes sense? What do I know? What do I not know? Someone is proposing something, or it looks like something is coming up, or it looks like I'm going to quit, or it looks like this is the direction in which things are going, or am I doing this in a way that doesn't burn any bridges? Have I looked at what the offer that's, I think that it is time right now over the next month, because this is a very strange way to put it. The overall energy of the time is strategic and propulsive and is moving us forward in closer to where we want to be strategically, especially by the time we come into May and June. For those who have Mercury retrograde in their birth chart, it might be that April does that for you. But the strategy on a day-to-day basis, I would strongly suggest waking up every morning and being clear about what your priorities are for that day, for the next month, and focus on the most mundane, factual, real tasks and questions. Because I think that it is in finding immediate solutions that you will get greater clarity for some of those answers. There's going to be enough happening. There might be doors you have to knock on, opportunities you have to avail of, things you have to show up for, things that don't work out, things that are going slower than normal because Mercury is retrograde, things that are not showing up the way they showed up when Mercury was direct and moving quickly in February and early March. Other things that can be taken. And with Mercury retrograde, as is famously said, there's perhaps an acceleration of tying loose ends and finishing up certain things. And if you are trying to go from A to Z and it's been overwhelming, then it may be that the universe with this eclipse cycle comes in and says, you know what, you're overwhelmed because you have choices and you have resources, and so this is slowing I'm going to start to force you to go through that portal. So it could be that during Mercury retrograde, while Mercury was direct, you were in expansive mode, and while Mercury is in retrograde, you go, you know what, I've got to deal with this, and I've got to deal with this, I've got to get rid of this, I've got to get rid of that, I've got to do this. It could be that what you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis to honor practical priorities has a cleanup quality to it, or has a take care of these past things quality to it. Now, for some people, it's going to be tax time by April the 15th. So if you're using some tax software, or if you just honor the mundane and keep things real. Keep things real. It's a very strange thing for me to say, and I can hear myself saying it and just be like, on the one hand, we're letting the eclipses in this Mercury retrograde give us clarity about something strategic and overall and expansive. Move us in a direction that is dear to our heart. And that doesn't sound very real or very factual. It's real enough to us, but it's not mundane. On the other hand, my advice is strongly to not let the mundane go and to stay grounded and rooted in the mundane as you go through April and you start to get, strange to say, clarity on a few things, or the needle starts to move in certain directions, or you're in this kind of hanged man mode, because remember, April, when we look at the tarot card for it numerically, it would be Hanged Man. May would be the next card, the Death card, the Change card. So we are waiting, suspended, for clarity to come and to be able to see and understand what is this new solution, this new thing that I am designing that is right for me, that I am moving towards. And let April do what it needs to do to get you that information. In the meantime, let the facts of your life, the commitments, the verbal and written commitments, the contracts that you're honoring, the offers that you might be looking at, what you're showing up for, what you know, what you are going over, your finances, your financial life, any urgency around that. I keep coming back to that largely because it's eclipse times, anything health related, anything. Let the realities of your life inform you while you are partnering with the eclipses in Mercury retrograde to help you design where you're going to start to move forward, whether in April if you're Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, or May and June if you're Mercury direct. Now it is a time for getting real, because what you need to do is going to be presented to you. The clues for that are going to be presented to you on a mundane level. When the eclipses, when the universe, when God taking the wheel, when Mercury going retrograde occur at around the same time, the messages and the clues, if it's getting clarity on things that are in your blind spot, that may happen through communication. You're talking to someone, you hear something, you see something, you gain clarity. You're just like those aha moments. And with Mercury retrograde, they can sometimes be really kind of disappointing. But that's Mercury saying, the reason why I reversed is I need you to know this, so that you can then determine whether this is going to be part of your life moving forward in the way that you thought it was, or whether you will be able to honor that it has served its purpose and actually your future is in a different direction. And that's okay. It's just the disappointment of something not quite being what we thought it was, based on what we were being told, and assuming that what we were being told was the full picture, but it may not be the full picture, can be challenging. And sometimes it shows up during Mercury retrograde, or sometimes it shows up as something that is offered during Mercury retrograde, but then once Mercury goes direct, looks different. That means you've committed to it while Mercury's retrograde. Oh, I didn't know this. Oh, I didn't know this. Oh, this is different. Oh, damn it. But the clues for which direction to go in and what to do and how to navigate will be in the mundane. And it may be that it is time to start grounding anything that you're approaching, any door that you're knocking on, any outlook that is fantasist. I'm not saying you need to get so real that you close out things, especially sometimes there's a need to be like, you know what, I'm going to say yes to this and I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out later. I'll say yes to this and I'll figure it out later. I'll find the creative solution. I think it's like Priyanka Chopra Jonas. I don't want to attribute it to someone else, who I think there was some interview that I saw where she said, that's kind of how she does things. She'll say yes, if there's an opportunity, then she'll figure out the details later. I would say, as you're dealing with this Mercury retrograde, it's worth it to at least be clear about what is totally grounded in reality, and where you're consciously, just be really conscious of, at least have an awareness to say, I think I'm going to say yes to this, but I'm really looking hard at it and going, can I really do this? Can I really make it happen? And you may choose to, or you may decide to say yes to it and figure it out. And that is a perfectly, in fact, that is an expansive strategy, and a lot of people have tried it. That is, whatever choice you make, my friends, is your choice. But let the reality, it is important. Let the facts and the reality of your life in different arenas drive. Let that take a little more center stage, because you might find that as that does so, it propels you to, first and foremost, with Mercury retrograde, it may mean that you realize that you have to do different things and clean up different things and go back on some different things, and focus on different things for a similar outcome or same outcome. Like, oh, I was doing this to earn cash here. I've got to now do this to do this. And it may have something linked to the past, or it might be Mercury retrograding in flavor. As we are getting ready for Mercury to go retrograde, all I'm going to say is it is time to get real and stay really real and grounded. Whether it is contracts, relationships, whatever it is. Communications, thinking, prioritization. I would, if you want a tip, then I would say every morning, or whenever you feel like it, every morning, try and get in touch with where you really want to go and what is in your heart and what the overall goal and outlook is. And it could be something you really wanted in the second half of 2023, or you thought you wanted and were jumping to move forward in July, August of 2023, and we're not able to. But now you know that the obstacles have been removed. So what is that overall strand? Articulating that. Number two, is there anything coming up that feels like an opportunity that you need to avail of? As I've said, during eclipses, very important. If there are 13 doors in front of you, whatever interviews, whatever it is that you've got lining up, whatever, show up for it. Let the universe match you with your door. Because God knows, those doors that are not your doors, you can do whatever you like in front of them, they're not going to open for you. And so that also means that beyond a certain point, especially during eclipse season, let go and let God when appropriate. Show up, do your best, and if something is not working out, be careful of becoming too maniacal around it. It's good advice anyway. Don't chase, attract. But at the same time, it does mean that we have to show up and try and do our best at whatever it is that we're doing and release the outcome. Just a well-known spiritual strategy, not something specific to what I'm sharing. So number one, staying in touch with the overall goal. Number two, scanning and preparing for anything that looks like an opportunity that could move you forward in some way. That is showing up. Ideally aligned to what that overall goal is, but during eclipse season, you can look at anything. That, I'm not saying look at anything that is against your values for some reason, but you never know. The eclipses are bringing it up to you, and it's not going to hurt you or harm you or compromise you. To show up for it, consider showing up for it. And the third, and this is going to be the bread and butter, this is going to be the majority of what we're doing. Deal with the realities of your life. What needs attention? What needs to happen? Where are things at? What do you know about your job, your relationships, your finances? And as you look at all these different, anything else that is important or pertinent to you, dealing with the health of a pet, dealing with the health of a loved one, issues related to mortality, which can be so tied up with eclipses. What is in front of you? And let that propel what your priorities are for the day. What do you need to do? Because in that process, I think you're going to realize, oh, in doing this way, in the universe opening this, but especially in the universe closing this, in the universe eclipsing this in, but especially in the universe eclipsing certain things out, you're going to realize which doors are opening, which are closing, what is being opened for you, what is accelerating, etc., etc., etc. But it is not a time when Mercury is retrograde to be fantasist and to not pay attention to the details. And it's, as I said, it's a weird counter advice. On the one hand, we say, well, when Mercury is retrograde, all the details are thrown out the window. All the more reason. When Mercury is retrograde, there isn't clarity. Things are still pretty clear when it comes to priorities related to the important things in life. financial goals, career goals, job goals, relationship goals, priorities going on around you, what needs attention. And as I said, if it feels like it has a Mercury retrograde quality where you can understand why Mercury, when you're realizing that you're spending a certain amount of time over the next month doing cleanup tasks, and it could be that the impetus to do it is dealing with very real things, then you might realize, oh, I see why Mercury is going retrograde, because I've got to deal with this stuff and it's being made more urgent for me, or being made more of a priority for me, because wherever it is that I'm going to need this stuff cleared. I'm going to need to have certain things in place. The third thing I wanted to tell you is that the Mercury cycle in Capricorn ends on April the 11th, but there's a phase that ends on April the 1st. The one set of tasks that I would encourage you to consider continuing to do over the next 3 or 4 days till April the 1st is, if there's anything related to the Capricorn part of the chart that has been expanding since December the 22nd, or you feel like you need to do and complete and close out, I would say try and do it by April the 1st. Even by April the 11th. I know that sometimes when Mercury goes retrograde, we have this fear of, well, I don't want to do this. I don't want to start this. I don't want to. Consider, if you are finishing something up, if you're dotting the I and crossing the T and getting to a certain place, maybe that isn't, yes, everything that is a start for something, but it's also a completion for something. We're not going to, you don't just stop living and stop doing things and stop acting. Let the details of your life and what needs attention and what needs urgency and what needs prioritization and what needs action continue to drive you to take the action that needs to be taken. As I said, something may come up and you feel like, oh, I've got to take this, and Mercury's retrograde. And if you're Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, great. If you're Mercury direct in your birth chart, by the time you're beginning of May, you're just like, what the hell? That doesn't look anything like what I said or we agreed to. But be patient. You never know. By June, you might be like, oh my God, it worked out. My shoulders had gone so high, I just realized. So if you need to, so just know, technically, by April the 1st, ideally honoring this Mercury cycle, you're completing everything that needs to be. And I would actually say, if it takes you till April the 11th, that's fine, because it may be that part of that Mercury retrograde in Aries until Mercury Sun Cazimi, or the Mercury Sun conjunction in Aries, on April the 11th, we start the next Mercury cycle in Aries. So this idea of, feeling pressured perhaps to make choices related to the Aries part of the chart, related to the Taurus part of the chart. What does it mean for Jupiter and Uranus to conjunct? We'll know that soon enough when we get to that May 8th new moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus. It may be that when we look at the Aries part of the chart, the house occupied by Aries, we're feeling like decisions need to be made. And it could very well be that decisions and actions related to that start up when the Mercury cycle starts on April the 11th, and even more strongly after April the 25th, once Mercury goes direct, and as we head into May and June. But till April the 1st, and even April the 11th, if you want to wrap up and finish up the implementation, especially through communication or technical means or transactional means, whatever the Mercury cycle in Capricorn has been asking you and demanding of you, the Mercury cycles often provide the solutions that we need at any given time. Since December the 22nd, it could very well have been the Mercury cycle in Capricorn that has been the foundation of success and growth for you. So that while you've been thinking about, oh, what am I going to do in the Taurus part of the chart and with the Aries part of the chart, and how am I going to heal the Pisces part of the chart, and oh, and now we've got these transits of Aquarius happening during the month of February, and planets are conjuncting Pluto. The thing that has sustained is that Mercury cycle in Capricorn. After the April the 11th, it will be the Mercury cycle in Aries. So much of our life in 2024 is bound up with Mercury. As it is, the winged messenger is important when it comes to, even in the olden days, messages, communication. Communication is reality. You know, there's the sun, that is our solar self. There's the moon, that is our emotional and intuitive self, which is the next thing that we closely identify with. And after that, there's Mercury, our mental, verbal self. And everything that we know and experience is processed through words and grammar and syntax. All reality is grammar, and syntax. This laptop is on the table. So Mercury, and in 2024, because of the heavy emphasis on technology and the fact that everything happens through technology practically, unless you're a gardener or doing something like that, or, Mercury cycles are can't be ignored. So if there's something in the Capricorn part of the chart that you've been working on since December the 22nd, especially after January the 1st, try and, by all means, don't go into paralysis. Oh my God, I'm not going to do this now. I'm going to wait till this happens. I'm going to wait till that happens. Look, I'm going to let it be your decision, because it has to be your decision with regard to what you do and what you finish and what you start and when you do it. But all I'm saying is, if there's some things that need to be completed related to the Capricorn part of the chart, just because Mercury is going to be retrograde for the next 4 weeks, and especially if we feel like we need to complete certain things to put us in a stronger place, I don't know that we need to completely halt our lives and not do anything or not take any steps or not take any action because Mercury is retrograde. I mean, I committed to something when Mercury was retrograde last time around. Not last time around, 2 Mercury retrogrades ago when it happened in Virgo. And sure enough, when Mercury was direct, I learned things about it that I was really disappointed and frustrated by. But sure enough, by the time it was December, I was delighted that I'd committed to it. Yes, it was different from what it ended up being, but it delivered. And that's an extreme example of me actually committing to something while Mercury is retrograde. I'm just saying, if you've been working on something and something needs to be finished up related to the Capricorn part of your chart, sometimes when you're finishing things up, we know that that in itself is the launch of something new, and that might create a certain amount of anxiety around, oh, I don't want to. You don't have to launch anything if you don't want to. You can still finish things up if you need to. And it might be a little labored. It might be a little confusing. It might be a little chaotic with Mercury retrograde. But why not put the finishing touches on this edifice that you've been building in the Capricorn part of the chart since December 22nd, and especially since January the 1st? Finally, and I've already said this to you before, over all this stuff that is happening in April with the eclipses, as we head towards April the 20th and that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, that is the overall transit aspect that we're trying to honor, and that Spirit is trying to honor. So my 3 messages: it's time for getting real and not being in fantasy land and not thinking something is going to come through to do this and that to you. By all means, connect to where you want to go. By all means, show up to anything, any opportunity that feels interesting and exciting and you have question marks or even the slightest doubt over, as long as it's not compromising your safety in any way and you feel comfortable showing up to it, show up to it. That's expansive enough. But on a day-to-day basis, and you might be doing it anyway if you haven't done your taxes or things like that, it is time to deal with the facts, the reality, the details. and let the reality of what is being eclipsed in and out of your life help you be a part of the decision making, or be a part of the data that you're going to be pondering during April as you become clear about where you want to go by the time you head into May. Number two, right now, while Mercury is going retrograde, around April the 11th, when Mercury is combust and conjuncting the Sun, around April the 25th, when Mercury is going direct, if it feels like you can't move left or right, or you have an inkling or whatever, let the compass spin. If you don't have to commit to an overall, if you have questions, just put the questions in the air. You know what I mean by the compass spinning. It's just, you can't find your true north just yet. That's fine. Mercury is going retrograde for a reason. To try and bring things to our attention that have been in our blind spot right now. Let that process occur. If you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart and you feel decisive while Mercury is retrograde, great. I tend to see that. And you can see if that makes sense for you or not. Number three, complete the Mercury cycle in Capricorn by April 1st or April 11th. Really by April 11th. But go ahead, put the finishing touches on whatever you've been building in the Capricorn part of the chart. You'll know instinctively that the timing is right for that. And keep an eye towards, over everything, that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And that's where you might be questioning, because the growth and the expansion is in the Taurus and the Aries part of the chart, that's where, and because you might be like, I don't know what choice to make, I don't know which direction, just April is not the time for, April is the time to process. And April is the time to deal with mundane realities and details with enormous attention and care. And that is part of what I mean by get real. Do not gloss over things while Mercury is getting ready to go retrograde. But also deal with the realities of your life. And especially if dealing with the realities of your life, find you clearing clutter. I mean that to some extent literally and to some extent metaphorically. Then you know Mercury retrograde is at work. Hey, I'm going to do certain things to your reality so that you take care of this stuff, because it's got to get taken care of, because you're not going to be free to move forward quite as fast or in the direction that you want to. At the same time, you don't have to act in haste, but you do have to focus on your priorities. As you can tell, finally, an hour into this, the focus and the intent of this conversation is a little bit different. I think fairly significantly different, actually, but important, hopefully, I hope, and helpful, given where we're at right now. And it's different from the earlier Mercury retrograde video I did that was much more about in the conjunction with Chiron. And some of the stuff is repetitive, and I apologize for that. It's hard to talk about Mercury retrograde while not talking about the salient points. But I did want to, it felt right to address these things before I go into really the next thing I want to talk about, and I'm thinking about, is next week's transits. But even more importantly, the fact that Venus is getting ready to conjunct Neptune on April the 3rd. So I know I need to do a video on that, but I wanted to get this out first because it feels like it's the right time to share some of this stuff. I hope you found this video useful. If you're interested in a personal reading or for me to look at your birth chart, my details, my email address is in the description area below. You can email me there. I can send you information about rates and all that kind of stuff. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button. The wiggly bell on top will notify you when I do new videos. If you like this video, feel free to share it with your friends. Tell your friends about it if they'll find it useful. Comment, like, it drives more traffic to the site, and my gratitude to everybody who is watching these videos, finds them useful, comments, likes, and is supporting the channel. Thank you so much. Take care.